Now, an Oscar-winning director, Chloe Zhao, is being hailed as the pride of the Chinese people. But posts about her victory at the Academy Awards are being censored on the country's most popular social media platform. Ms Zhao has become the first Asian woman to win Best Director for her film Nomadland. The ceremony was not broadcast on the mainland, but many were able to watch clips of her acceptance speech on Weibo. Within an hour, they began to disappear, though.
When I was growing up in China, my dad and I used to play this game. We would memorize classic Chinese poems and texts, and we would recite it together and try to finish each other's sentences. And there's one that I remember so dearly. It's called the Three Character Classics. And the first phrase goes, 人之初，性本善. People at birth are inherently good.
Joining me live is Asia correspondent Adrian Brown. Adrian, what can we make of this censorship?
Well, you know, Laura, this Oscar ceremony is taking place, as your previous item indicated, against the backdrop of a Cold War. And from the perspective of Beijing, Chloe Zhao's win is political. You know, they can accept critics, but the worst thing in China's eyes is a critic who is successful. And Chloe Zhao is a successful critic. Her crime, if you like, was that 8 years ago, she gave an interview in which she criticized the regime, saying that she'd grown up in a country of lies. Now, I'm sure, you know, film directors in Australia have used much stronger language when talking about their government. But in China, you know, there's no statute of limitations, and that sort of thing remains very much on the statute book. China's leaders have not forgotten. On social media, as you indicated in your introduction, there was widespread praise before China's censorship machine began cranking up, and nowhere do they do censorship better than on the mainland. People in the street, though, were, you know, full of praise for the fact that a Chinese woman had reached the apogee of US cinema. But online, those comments have been scrubbed away. And of course, you know, the Oscar ceremony was not shown in China, and it wasn't shown for the first time in 52 years here in Hong Kong, because there was also another reason for that, Laura. One of the short documentary nominations was about the protests here in Hong Kong in 2019. And of course, what the authorities on the mainland wanted to avoid was that being mentioned, that, and a deeper fear was that in fact it might even win. It didn't win, but the director of the documentary that did win still raised the Hong Kong protests in his speech, saying the protesters in Hong Kong should not be forgotten. So from a Chinese perspective, not a great night.
Absolutely, and it's extraordinary that that level of censorship has reached Hong Kong, but it's not quite on par with the mainland yet. What were you able to see of the Oscars? Did you see the same scrubbing of comments, scrubbing of clips?
You know, here in Hong Kong, you know, we can still get Twitter. You don't get Twitter on the mainland. You get the Chinese equivalent of Twitter, which is Weibo. Those clips, you know, posts were appearing in the minutes after the award was announced, but they quickly disappeared, literally, you know, minutes later. Here in Hong Kong, we didn't have the same problem, but what is different this year is that it wasn't shown live. What people were treated to were recorded highlights of the ceremony. Of course, there was no mention of the fact that somebody raised the documentary about the protest. That wasn't mentioned here in Hong Kong.
It's so chilling indeed, Adrian.